My name is Nellie Dean. I have lived on the wild moors all my life. The wind here never rests. It moves over the hills like a living thing. The sky is often gray, and the sound of the wind feels like a song full of old memories. When I was young, I worked as a servant at a big house called Wuthering Heights. Later, I also worked at another home, Thrushcross Grange. I saw many things in those houses: love, hate, anger, and pain. But I also saw kindness, hope, and the power of time. This is my story. When I first came to Wuthering Heights, the house stood tall and strong on the lonely hill. The wind blew hard against its walls, but it never broke. Mr. Earnshaw was the master then. He lived there with his wife and 2 children, Hindley and Catherine. Hindley was proud, but Catherine was wild and full of life. She ran, laughed, and played outside in the mud. She was not afraid of anything. I loved her like my own child. One day, Mr. Earnshaw went to the city on a long trip. When he came back, he brought with him a small, dark-haired boy. The child looked poor and hungry. His clothes were torn, and his eyes were full of fear. Mr. Earnshaw said, "This boy was alone in the street. His name is Heathcliff. I will care for him as my own." From that day, Heathcliff became part of our family. But not everyone was happy about it. Mrs. Earnshaw did not like the strange boy, and Hindley became jealous. He could not stand that his father loved Heathcliff more than him. Catherine, though, was different. She liked Heathcliff right away. The 2 became close friends. They played together from morning till night. They ran across the moors, climbed the rocks, and shouted into the wind. They were wild and free, like 2 young wolves. Mr. Earnshaw grew old and sick. Before he died, he still loved Heathcliff more than Hindley. When the old man passed away, Hindley became the new master of the house, and everything changed. He sent Heathcliff to work outside with the servants. He treated him like dirt, but Heathcliff said nothing. His eyes grew cold, and his heart became hard. Catherine was angry at her brother. She still met Heathcliff in secret. They talked, laughed, and dreamed of a life far from Wuthering Heights. She said to him, "One day we will be free, Heathcliff. We will run and never come back." He smiled and said, "I will never leave you, Cathy. You are my heart." One night, Catherine and Heathcliff went walking far from the house. They reached Thrushcross Grange, a big, beautiful home where the Linton family lived. The windows were bright with warm light. Catherine wanted to look inside, but their dog saw her and bit her leg. She cried out, and the Lintons came to help. They took her inside and cared for her. She stayed there for weeks. When she returned home, she was different. Her clothes were new, her hair was clean, and she spoke softly like a lady. Heathcliff looked at her and felt pain. He said, "You have changed, Cathy." She said, "Only on the outside, Heathcliff. Inside, I am still me." But deep in her heart, she was no longer the wild girl who ran through the rain. Soon, Edgar Linton began to visit Wuthering Heights. He was kind, gentle, and rich. Catherine liked his calm ways and soft voice. Hindley was pleased because Edgar came from a fine family. Heathcliff, however, felt forgotten. He worked outside all day, his hands dirty, his heart full of anger. One evening, I heard Catherine talking to me in her room. She said, "Nellie, I love Heathcliff, but I can never marry him. It would be wrong. He is poor and has no name. If I married him, we would be lost." I said, "But you love him, my dear." She answered softly, "Yes, I do. But if I marry Edgar, I can help Heathcliff. I can make him strong." Heathcliff was near the door that night. He heard only the first part, that she could not marry him. He did not hear the rest. His face turned pale. Without a word, he left the house and disappeared into the dark. When Catherine found out the next morning, she cried and ran across the moors calling his name. But Heathcliff was gone. The wind carried her voice away. For 3 days she waited. Then Edgar came again and asked her to marry him. She said yes, but her heart was not full of joy. She told me, "If Heathcliff ever comes back, I will be happy again." They married soon after, and Catherine moved to Thrushcross Grange. Life there was calm and gentle. Edgar loved her deeply, and she tried to love him the same. The house was warm, with clean air and light from every window. But sometimes Catherine stood at the window and looked toward the moors. She missed the wild hills, the sound of the wind, and the boy who had vanished into the night. 3 years later, on a stormy evening, I was sitting by the fire when the door opened. A man stood there. His face was pale, his eyes dark and deep. For a moment I could not speak. It was Heathcliff. He had returned. He looked different, taller, stronger, and dressed like a gentleman. I said, "Heathcliff, is it really you?" He answered in a quiet voice, "Yes, Nellie. I have come home." The next day, Catherine saw him. She ran to him with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Heathcliff, why did you leave me?" He looked at her with pain and love. "You said I was nothing," he said. "I went away to become something." Catherine cried, "You are more than everything to me." When Edgar saw them together, he grew cold and silent. He knew at once that Catherine's heart had never truly been his. But he tried to be calm and said, "You are welcome in my house, Mr. Heathcliff, if you come as a friend." Heathcliff smiled slightly. "Of course," he said, but his eyes told a different story. He began to visit often. Catherine laughed again for the first time in years. They walked in the garden, remembering old days, but I could see danger coming. Heathcliff's smile was full of sadness and anger. He had not come back only for love. There was something darker in his heart, something cold and sharp. He stayed close to Hindley, who now lived in Wuthering Heights as a broken man. Hindley drank every night and lost all his money. Heathcliff lent him money, but he did it not to help, only to take everything from him later. Slowly, the house became his. Catherine began to fall ill. Her face grew pale, her voice weak. She said to me one night, "Nellie, my heart feels broken between two worlds. I love Edgar, but Heathcliff is part of my soul. How can I live like this?" I tried to comfort her, but she looked away. "If Heathcliff dies, I die too," she whispered. One stormy night, Heathcliff came to see her. She was lying in bed, her face white as snow. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "Why did you leave me?" she said. "You killed me when you went away." He took her hand and said, "You said I was nothing, so I became nothing. But I never stopped loving you." They looked at each other for a long moment, two broken hearts still tied together by pain. That night, the wind howled around the house. The windows shook. The trees bent low under the rain. Before morning, Catherine was gone. When Heathcliff heard, he cried out like a wild animal. "Cathy, come back! Do not leave me here alone!" His voice carried out across the moors. From that moment, he was never the same. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. After Catherine's death, the world around us seemed to stop. The air felt colder, the sky darker. Thrushcross Grange was silent for many weeks. Edgar Linton stayed alone in his room and did not speak to anyone. He loved Catherine so much that when she was gone, it felt like part of him died too. At Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff changed completely. His heart had turned into stone. He walked around the house with eyes full of fire, but there was no life in them. Sometimes he went outside and stood on the moors in the wind. He would stand there for hours and call softly, "Cathy, where are you?" I often saw him from far away. He looked like a shadow against the gray sky. Soon after, Hindley died. His life had become a dark path of drink and anger. Heathcliff took his chance. He became the master of Wuthering Heights and kept Hindley's young son Hareton in the house. The boy was kind, but Heathcliff did not show him love. He made the child work like a servant, just as Hindley had once made Heathcliff work. I said to him, "You should be kinder to the boy. He has done nothing to hurt you." Heathcliff looked at me and said, "He will feel what I felt." Time passed slowly. At Thrushcross Grange, Edgar raised his daughter, little Cathy. She was bright and curious, just like her mother, and her eyes were full of life. Edgar wanted her to grow up kind and safe. He said to me, "She must never go to Wuthering Heights. I do not want Heathcliff to touch her life." I promised him that I would protect her. Years went by. The girl grew into a young woman. She loved to walk on the hills and pick flowers in the wind. The moors were her playground. One day she walked too far and saw a tall young man fixing a gate. He was strong and brown from the sun. When she spoke to him, his voice was quiet and rough. She smiled and asked, "What is your name?" He said, "Hareton." She laughed. "That is a strange name." He smiled a little but said nothing more. When she came home, she told me about him. I felt fear in my heart. "You must not go there again," I said. "That is Wuthering Heights, and the man you met is your cousin." But Kathy was curious. "He was kind," she said. "Why should I not talk to him?" Around that time, Heathcliff brought another person to Wuthering Heights, his own son, Linton. Linton's mother, Isabella, had died in the city, and the boy was sick and weak. He was pale, thin, and coughed all the time. Heathcliff looked at him without love. "He is soft," he said, "but he will be useful." I did not understand what he meant then, but soon I did. Heathcliff's plan was simple. He wanted his son Linton to marry young Kathy. If they married and Edgar Linton died, all the land and both houses would belong to Heathcliff. He would own everything that once belonged to the people he hated. At first, Heathcliff acted polite. He sent small notes to Edgar and asked if Kathy could write to her cousin Linton. Edgar agreed, thinking it was only family friendship. Kathy began to send letters. She felt sorry for the sick boy. She wrote kind words, and soon she wanted to see him. I told her no many times, but she did not listen. Love and curiosity are strong in young hearts. One day she ran away and went to Wuthering Heights. When she returned, her face was full of light. "He is gentle and sweet," she said. I told her, "His father is not. You must stay away." But she could not forget Linton. Heathcliff kept pushing the two together. He made them meet again and again. Poor Linton did not have the strength to fight his father's plan. He was afraid of him. When I saw Heathcliff look at them, his eyes were dark with a strange fire. He said to me, "Kathy will marry my son, and then I will have all that I lost." Edgar became ill during that time. His face grew thin, and his hands shook. He could not walk far. He said to me one evening, "If I die, I fear for Kathy. She is too young and soft to face Heathcliff." I promised I would not let harm come to her, but life is cruel. Heathcliff's plan moved faster than we could stop it. One cold day, Kathy and I went to visit Linton because we heard he was very sick. When we arrived, Heathcliff met us at the door. He smiled, but there was no kindness in it. He said, "You cannot leave until they are married." I cried out, "You cannot keep us here." He looked at me calmly and said, "You will stay. The doors are locked." Kathy was afraid and angry. She said, "Why are you doing this?" Heathcliff answered, "Because I waited too long for my revenge." He forced the marriage the next day. Poor Linton was so weak that he could barely stand. Kathy wept through the whole ceremony. When it was over, Heathcliff let us go home. Kathy ran to Thrushcross Grange, but her father was already very weak. He was lying in bed, breathing slowly. She sat beside him, took his hand, and whispered, "I am here, Father. Forgive me." He opened his eyes and smiled faintly. "My dear, you are home," he said. That night he passed away peacefully. After Edgar's death, Heathcliff took everything. Kathy had no power now. Thrushcross Grange belonged to him. She moved to Wuthering Heights, where she lived with her sick husband. Linton was afraid of his father and said little. Kathy tried to be kind to him, but he was too weak and full of fear. Soon he died too, and Heathcliff stood by his bed without a tear. He said coldly, "Now everything is mine." After that, Kathy became quiet. She often sat by the window and looked out at the moors. Sometimes she spoke to me softly. "Nellie, I feel so alone here. The house is dark, and everyone seems to hate me." I tried to comfort her. "Be strong, my dear. One day this darkness will end." Heathcliff walked through the rooms like a ghost. Even after he had taken everything, he was not happy. I once said to him, "You have all you wanted. Why do you still look so sad?" He looked out the window and said quietly, "Because she is gone. What is revenge without her?" From that time, I often saw him walk outside at night. The wind was cold, but he did not care. Sometimes I heard him talking to the air. He said, "Kathy, come to me. You promised you would not leave." His face grew thin, and his eyes looked far away, as if he saw someone who was not there. The house became quiet again, full of whispers and shadows. The servants left one by one. Only Kathy, Hareton, and I stayed. I often heard Hareton reading to himself at night. He wanted to learn, even though Heathcliff had never taught him. Kathy began to help him little by little. It was the first small light in that dark house. One morning, I found Heathcliff sitting in Catherine's old room. The window was open, and the wind blew his hair. He looked peaceful for the first time in years. When I spoke to him, he did not answer. He was gone. I closed the window and whispered, "Now you are free, Heathcliff. Go find her." I felt the air grow softer, as if the wind itself carried a long sigh. After Heathcliff died, the house became still. There was no anger, no shouting, no sound of doors closing hard. The rooms were quiet, and the air felt different. I walked through the hall and felt something I had not felt in many years. Peace. The dark shadow that had lived in Wuthering Heights was gone. The wind outside still blew strong, but now it sounded soft, like a long breath of rest. We buried Heathcliff beside Catherine on the hill above the house. The grass there was green, and the view reached far across the moors. The priest said the words quietly, and only a few people stood by the grave. The sky was gray, but a small ray of light broke through the clouds. As I looked at the two graves side by side, I thought, now their hearts are together again. After that day, life slowly began to change. Kathy still lived in the house, and Hareton stayed there too. They were the only young people left. At first, they did not speak much. Kathy still felt bitter because of everything Heathcliff had done. She said to me, "I cannot forgive what he did to my father." I said, "I know, my dear, but anger will only hurt your heart. Hareton is not his father. He has his own soul." Hareton worked hard every day in the yard. He took care of the animals and the land. His hands were rough and his clothes were often dirty, but he was honest and kind. He had a quiet sadness in his eyes, the kind that comes from a hard life. One morning, Kathy saw him trying to read a small book. He held it close to his face and frowned. She walked over and said softly, "Would you like me to help you?" He looked up, surprised. He wanted to refuse, but then he nodded. From that day, Kathy began to teach him how to read and write. She sat by the window with him every afternoon. Sometimes he grew angry with himself when he made mistakes, but she was patient. She said, "You will learn. Just take your time." And slowly, his words became clearer, his writing neater. I watched them from the kitchen and felt a quiet joy. I had seen so much pain in this house. Now, at last, I saw hope. Weeks turned into months. Kathy and Hareton began to smile more. They planted flowers in the garden and opened the windows to let in the fresh air. The smell of bread and roses filled the house. Hareton fixed the old walls, and Kathy cleaned the rooms. It was as if they were waking the house from a long, sad dream. One evening they sat outside near the garden. The sky was pink and gold. The moors stretched far and wide, peaceful and green. Kathy said, "It is strange to think of all that happened here. Sometimes I still feel them. Heathcliff and my mother. Like they are watching us." Hareton looked at her and said, "Maybe they are happy to see you smiling again." Kathy smiled. "Maybe," she said. They walked together often. The wind blew through their hair, and the air was full of life. Hareton told her stories about when he was a boy. Kathy listened with soft eyes. "You were hurt too," she said. "But you stayed kind." He looked down and said, "Kindness was the only thing left to me." Sometimes, when I passed by the room where Catherine once lay sick, I stopped and listened. The house no longer whispered with anger. It breathed quietly, like a person finally sleeping after a long night. The light from the candles shone warm on the walls. The ghosts of the past were gone. One spring morning, I saw Kathy and Hareton standing by the graves. The sky was clear, and the grass was full of small white flowers. They cleaned the stones and placed fresh blooms between them. Kathy said softly, "Mother, you can rest now. We will take care of this place." Hareton took her hand, and they stood together, silent, looking across the moors. After that day, they were never apart. They worked side by side, laughed together, and filled the house with new life. I sometimes sat by the fire and watched them. Kathy would bring me tea and say, "You have cared for this house your whole life, Nellie. Now it will care for you." I smiled and said, "It is enough for me to see it full of peace." Lockwood, the man who once rented Thrushcross Grange, came to visit again. He looked around and said, "This cannot be the same Wuthering Heights I knew." I said, "It is the same house, but the hearts inside have changed." He looked at Kathy and Hareton and smiled. "It seems love has found its way back here." That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone by the fire. The wind moved softly outside the window. I thought about all the years I had lived in this place, the laughter of young Catherine, the dark eyes of Heathcliff, the pain and anger that had filled the air. But now it was all quiet. The past had finally ended. Sometimes, when the moon is full and the hills are white with mist, I walk outside. I hear the wind moving through the grass, and for a moment, I think I see two figures walking together across the moors. Their shapes are soft and far away. I do not feel afraid. I only whisper, "Be at peace, my dear ones." Then the wind carries the sound away. Now the house is alive again. The rooms are bright. The air smells of bread and flowers, and the laughter of Kathy and Hareton fills every corner. They plan to marry soon and move to Thrushcross Grange. I will go with them and keep the house warm. Sometimes I look back at Wuthering Heights, standing strong on the hill. It is still touched by the wild wind, but it no longer feels cold. It is just part of the land, quiet, strong, and full of memories. Love and revenge once lived there, but now only love remains. And when the sun sets over the moors and the wind whispers through the grass, I can almost hear her voice again, gentle and free, like the sound of the hills themselves. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to English Medium Stories. Stay with us for more classic stories in easy English. My name is Jane. I am 30 years old. My life was calm before I met Oliver. I worked at a small office in the city. I lived alone in a small flat. I cooked simple food. I watched films in the evening. I felt safe in my routine. I did not have much, but I had peace. One day a friend invited me to a small dinner at her place. I did not want to go at first because I was tired from work, but she said it would be quiet and simple, so I agreed. That evening, I met Oliver for the first time. He was tall and quiet. He had soft eyes and a warm smile. When he looked at me, I felt seen. When he spoke to me, I felt calm. We talked about work, the city, and our days. His voice was gentle. I felt comfortable with him, even though we had just met. When I left that night, I felt warm in a way I did not feel for a long time. A few days later, he sent me a message and asked if we could meet. We walked in a park near my home. The sky was clear, and people sat on the grass. We talked again. He asked many questions about my life. He wanted to know what I liked to eat, what colors I liked, what music I listened to. His interest felt sweet. I felt important. When I got home, I sat on my sofa for a long time. I felt light. I thought maybe this was the start of a good thing. We met more after that. He brought me small gifts like a flower or a sweet drink. He said he thought of me during the day. I smiled at his words. I felt special. My friends said I looked brighter. I agreed. I started to think about him at night before I slept. I started to wait for his messages. I checked my phone more often. I hoped he liked me as much as I liked him. One evening, we sat near a quiet river. He told me he wanted a real relationship. I felt joy. I said yes. We held hands. I felt warm and steady. In that moment, I thought I found the right person. I thought my life would get better with him in it. At first, everything felt easy. Oliver wanted to see me often. He called me every morning. He asked about my meals and my day. I felt cared for, but slowly, his questions changed. He started asking who I talked to at work. He wanted to know where I went during my lunch break. He asked why I liked some friends more than others. His voice stayed calm, so I told myself he only cared. I told myself this was normal. I wanted to make him happy, so I answered every question. I did not want to cause trouble in our new relationship. A few weeks later, he asked if I could spend less time with my friends. He said they did not respect me. I asked him why he thought that. He said they were loud and careless. He said I looked tired after seeing them. I did not agree, but I did not want to upset him. I told him I could see them less often. He smiled and said he felt better when I stayed home. I wanted his smile, so I said yes. After that, he asked if we could spend weekends only together. He said he missed me during the week. I said yes again. He thanked me and said I was the only person who understood him. His praise made me feel warm, so I thought I did the right thing. Slowly, my days began to change. I woke up thinking about how to make Oliver happy. I dressed in colors he liked. I ordered food he preferred when he came to my home. I watched shows he chose. I answered his calls even when I felt tired. He called often and wanted to know where I was at every moment. If I did not answer, he sent more messages. I told myself it was fine. I told myself every couple did this. One night he got upset because I visited my sister after work. I told him I forgot to tell him because my day was busy. His voice got low. He said he did not like surprises. He said it made him feel left out. I felt bad. I did not want him to feel that way. I said I was sorry. He accepted my apology, but his voice stayed cold for the rest of the call. That night, I could not sleep well. I worried I hurt him. From that day, I told him every small plan before I did it. He seemed happier when I did that. He said I was thoughtful. I felt proud of myself for keeping the peace. But inside, I started to feel tired. My mind felt heavy with every detail I had to share. Still, I stayed quiet. I wanted the calm moments. I did not want arguments. Months passed, and my world grew small. I did not see my friends anymore. I only saw my sister sometimes. Work felt harder because I checked my phone so often. I feared missing his calls. I did not want him to feel ignored. When people asked if I was okay, I smiled and said yes. It was easier than explaining the truth. At home, I moved carefully. When Oliver came over, I made sure everything was clean. He did not like messy rooms. I made sure the music matched his taste. He liked soft songs. I made sure the food was simple because he did not like strong flavors. I wanted him to feel safe in my home. I wanted him to feel close to me. But each time he left, I felt a light fade from the room. I sat on my sofa and felt tired in a way I could not explain with simple words. It felt like I used all my strength on small things. My friends stopped inviting me out because I always said no. My sister asked why I was quiet all the time. I told her work was hard. I did not want her to worry. I did not want to admit that I felt smaller each day. I did not want to admit that something in my life did not feel right. I tried to stay strong. I tried to focus on the good moments with Oliver. But then one evening, I felt a calm inside me break a little. Oliver and I went to a small cafe. I saw a group of women laughing near a window. Their laughter sounded warm. They looked free. I watched them for a moment. A soft ache moved through me. I could not recall the last time I laughed like that. I could not recall the last time I sat with friends without fear of upsetting someone. It felt distant, like a memory from another life. Oliver noticed my quiet face and asked if I was fine. I said yes. I smiled. I did not want problems. But when I looked out the window again, I felt a part of myself I had forgotten. A part that once felt bright and steady. A part that used to enjoy life without fear. I went home that night and sat on my bed for a long time. I looked around my room. It felt like a place made for Oliver, not for me. The colors, the music, the food, the scents. Nothing felt like mine anymore. I tried to think about the person I was before I met him. It felt hard. I felt far from that version of myself. I felt weak and unsure. I wanted to understand how I reached this point. I wanted to understand why I felt so tired all the time. I wanted to stand up for myself, but I did not know how. I felt like a shadow of the woman I used to be. A quiet thought moved through my mind that night. It was soft, but steady. I wanted my strength back. Before I continue rest of the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now let's continue. The next weeks passed slowly. I woke each morning with the same routine. I checked my phone before I even sat up. Oliver always sent a message at night, telling me to sleep early or reminding me to be careful at work. At first it felt sweet. Now it felt like a rule. I told myself it was normal, but the truth felt different inside me. I felt tired even before the day began. At work, people spoke to me, but my mind was somewhere else. I tried to focus, but my thoughts kept going back to Oliver. I wondered if he was happy with me. I wondered if I said anything wrong. I wondered if I forgot to tell him a plan. My head felt full all the time. When my coworker Ben asked if I wanted to join a group lunch, I said no. I did not want to explain where I was. I did not want Oliver to ask questions later. Ben looked confused but did not push. When he walked away, I felt alone. That evening, Oliver called. He asked what I ate. He asked if I talked to anyone new. He asked why my voice sounded low. I told him I was just tired. He said I should sleep early. I said yes. I always said yes. When the call ended, I held my phone and stared at the screen for a long time. I felt small. I did not want to feel that way, but I did. One Saturday afternoon, my sister Beth came to my flat without telling me. When I opened the door, she looked surprised to see how pale I felt. She asked if we could talk. I did not know how to say no, so I let her in. She sat on my sofa and looked at me with worry. She asked why I always canceled plans. She asked why I never smiled the way I used to. I told her everything was fine. She looked at me for a long time before speaking again. Her voice was soft. She said she missed the old me. Her words made my throat tight, and I looked away. I told her I was just busy, but she did not believe me. She held my hand and asked if I was happy. I could not answer. She stayed with me for an hour, then hugged me before she left. When the door closed, I felt a deep quiet around me. Later that night, Oliver asked why Beth came. He wanted to know what we talked about. He wanted to know if she said anything about him. His voice was sharp, not gentle. I felt my body tense, but I tried to sound calm. I told him she only asked how I was. He asked again and again. I felt tired, so tired, but I answered each question. When the call ended, I sat on the floor next to my bed. I felt like I could not carry this weight anymore. A few days later, something simple made me pause. I walked to the small shop near my flat to buy bread. The street was busy with people. Some walked fast. Some laughed with friends. A few children ran with small steps and bright voices. I watched them for a moment. Their energy felt warm. Their freedom felt clear. I stood there holding a small bag of bread while people moved past me. I felt far from them, as if I lived in a smaller world than theirs. When I reached home, I placed the bread on the table and looked at my flat again. I saw how much of it was shaped by Oliver's likes. The colors, the small items, the soft music that played on my speaker. It all felt like pieces of him. I could not find myself in the room. A quiet sadness rose in me as I stood there. I felt the loss of the girl I used to be. That night, Oliver came to visit. He looked tired, and his voice sounded flat. He asked why my replies were slow during the day. He asked if I was upset with him. I said no. He asked again. I said no again. He stepped closer and said he felt unsure about me. His words made my heart drop. I told him I cared for him. He stayed silent. Then he asked if I could try harder. He said he needed more from me. I said I would try. I said it even though I did not know how much more I had to give. After he left, I sat on my bed and held my pillow close. I wanted to cry, but I felt too tired to cry. My mind felt slow. I felt like my life belonged to his moods. I could not remember the last time I made a choice only for myself. The next morning, I stood in front of my mirror before work. I looked at my face. I looked at my eyes. They felt dull. I touched my hair and straightened it the way Oliver liked. Then I stopped. I moved my hand away. For a moment, I let my hair fall naturally. I stared at myself. I did not look like the woman I used to be. I felt like my days were built around one person, and that person was not me. On the way to work, I walked slowly. My steps felt heavy. I knew I needed to make a change, but I did not know where to start. I did not want to lose Oliver, but I also felt lost within myself. My thoughts formed a small truth I could no longer ignore. The days after our last call felt slow. I moved through them quietly. I worked, I cooked, I cleaned, but nothing felt steady inside me. I felt like I walked through a soft fog. I tried to understand how I lost so much of myself, but the answer never came in one piece. It came in small moments. One evening, Oliver called with a tense voice. He asked why I did not answer fast that afternoon. I told him I was busy with a report. He said he felt pushed aside. He asked if I still cared for him. His tone pressed on me, and I felt tired all over again. When the call ended, I looked at my phone and placed it face down on the table. The silence in the room felt heavy, but also calm. A short time later, my sister Beth visited. She did not message first. When I opened the door, she looked at me for a long moment. She said I looked worn out. I tried to smile, but it was weak. She sat with me on the sofa and asked why I always canceled plans. She asked why my voice sounded flat when we talked. I looked down. I told her I was only tired. She touched my hand and said she missed the lively version of me. Her words reached a place inside me I had ignored. When she left, the quiet in the room felt different. It felt like a gentle reminder that someone cared. The next day, I walked home from the shop with a small bag of food. I watched people move around me. Some held children's hands. Some talked with friends. Some walked alone with relaxed steps. I felt far from them. I missed that ease. I missed being able to move through a day without fear of upsetting someone. Later, Oliver asked if he could visit that night. I felt a soft push inside me to say no. I needed a quiet evening. I needed a moment without pressure. I told him I wanted to rest alone. He did not like my words. He said it felt strange. He said he needed me. I told him again, calmly, that I needed quiet time. He hung up without saying goodbye. Even so, I felt a small piece of air open inside my chest. It was a tiny step, but it was mine. The next morning, he did not send his usual message. The silence felt unusual, but also peaceful. At work, Ben asked if I wanted to join a small lunch group. For the first time in months, I said yes. We sat outside the office and talked about simple things. I listened, and slowly, I felt myself relax. When someone said a small joke, I laughed. The sound felt light, like a part of me I forgot I had. In the evening, Oliver finally called. He asked if I was still upset. I told him I was not upset, but I needed time to think about myself. He did not like this. He said I was being unfair. He said he gave everything. I listened quietly. When he stopped, I told him I felt lost in the relationship. I told him I needed space to feel steady again. He said he did not know if he could stay with someone who needed distance. I heard the truth in his voice. I also heard a truth inside myself. We ended the call with no anger, just a simple end. When I placed my phone down, I felt a soft calm spread through the room. It was not joy. It was not sorrow. It felt like a slow breath after a long time. The next morning, I opened my window. Cool air filled my flat. I stood there for a long moment, watching the street below. People walked with quiet steps. A small dog ran after a leaf. A bus passed slowly. Life moved in simple ways. I made myself tea and sat near the window. The cup felt warm in my hands. I looked around my home and saw the small things I once cared about before I changed them for someone else. I felt a gentle sense of myself return, piece by piece. I knew I still had learning to do. I knew I had a long road ahead. But I also knew this. I was ready to live for myself again. And that truth felt like strength. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to English Medium Stories. Stay with us for more classic stories in easy English.